Credit resting, okay?
Yes, it's another edition of Graham Chapman Rests, a series of 400 half-hour programs which look at the life of a man who rests a lot. Playing Graham Chapman is Graham Chapman. Last week he rested. This week he starts off resting yet again.
Do you think I'm overdoing it? Or?
I think I saw your lip move.
Oh.
I think it's the zany gears a bit over the top. I think you just ought to wear something normal, Graham, like you usually wear, a carrot costume or a goose, something like that.
Oh, that's very good.
ومن كل عمقنا بغيناك ومن كل عمق.
What have the Romans ever done for us? They've led us by the bastards. They've taken everything we had, and not just from us, from our fathers and from our fathers' fathers.
And from our fathers' fathers' fathers.
Yeah.
And from our fathers' 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 fathers.
Yeah, don't labour the points now. And what have they ever given us in return?
The aqueduct.
What?
The aqueduct.
Yeah, they gave us that. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and the sanitation.
Oh, yeah, the sanitation. Remember what the city used to be like, Reg?
Yeah, all right. I grant you, the aqueduct and the sanitation are two things the Romans have done.
And the roads.
Well, yeah, obviously the roads go without saying, but apart from the sanitation, the aqueduct and the roads...
Irrigation. Medicine. Education.
Yeah, all right.
And the wine.
Yeah,
that's one thing we really won't miss.
Yeah, but apart from the sanitation, the medicine, the education, the wine, public order, irrigation, roads, a fresh water system and public health, what have the Romans ever done for us?
Brought peace.
What? Peace? Oh, shut up!
Actually, I think we should do it.
The year is AD 33. Members of the People's Front of Judea plan their intended overthrow of the Roman Empire. They're led by Reg, better known as John Cleese. Indeed, the revolutionaries as a group are better known as Monty Python.
Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, my scroll back.
She really loves your shows. We
My wax tablets. Oh, my daughter loves your programme. She's only 18 months. It's just her sense of humour.
The Pythons are filming their Life of Brian on location in Tunisia. It's a comedy.
One more rehearsal, sorry.
Right, OK, here we go. Original script.
Right.
I won't say some of these jokes are old.
It's 10 years now since the six men formed their flying circus, and it's rare for them to work together nowadays. So we took this opportunity to take a look at the origins and the philosophy of the Monty Python phenomenon, and also eavesdrop inconspicuously on their current movie.
You can see yourselves at home now. See how silly you look?
Monty Python is a success story. The 45 TV shows have been sold to more than 20 countries, from Zambia to Pakistan, from Japan to Germany.
Ich fälle Bäume, trag Stöckel, Schuh und Stumpf und Büstenhalter.
It's also constantly being rerun across America. The group has sold more than 1 million records and more than 1.25 million books. Their previous film, The Holy Grail, has grossed to date nearly $10 million.
Camelot. 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 It's only a model. Shh.
Accordingly, the Pythons are probably better known internationally than any other British group, and also richer.
Hello. I've been asked to read this prepared statement on behalf of the Monty Python boys, who are here on location in North Africa. Unfortunately, they have been so spoiled by success in show business that they are now too rich to speak without being paid enormous sums of money. Also, for tax reasons, they're not really here, so stumm. However, they would very much have liked to talk to you, had you been able to afford them, especially as they're now making a film in Tunisia, which obviously they'd like to plug, because it's costing nearly $4.5 million, which is the sort of money these boys need now before they'll speak.
Despite their success and wealth as a troupe, the Pythons have split up and gone their separate ways. So this is something of a reunion.
And as a special favour, in memory of this, they have consented to wave at the camera.
Eric Idle devised his own BBC Two series, Rutland Weekend Television.
I think it's John's title, Rutland Weekend Television. I once bought it off him for a shilling for life, the world rights forever. And I don't know, it appealed to me. I like the small. I mean, I've got a parody mind, really. And it's just the small compared to the large is always funny.
On Rutland Weekend's new dramatisation of one of the world's longest books. Malicious Glymph has taken Leo Tolstoy's very long story, War and Peace, and turned it into a very long television series.
I think I learned more from that than I did from Python, as a matter of fact. Because it's only when you can really expand and make a lot of mistakes that you can learn anything. So I find that's a very useful thing of doing something small for BBC Two in a cupboard, you know, for no money. What you learn is never do anything small for BBC Two in a cupboard for no money.
Idle had great success on NBC in America, both as a presenter of Saturday Night Live and with his own special, The Ruttles.
I must be in love.
Well, George was in it. George was always a Ruttle fan. Apparently John liked it. Ringo, I think, liked it after 68, he said.
A job.
I'm leaving you.
Well, when are you coming back?
I'm not. I'm going for good.
What for?
We're just not getting on.
Not getting on? We happen to be very happily married.
We're not.
I am.
I'm not.
Oh, I see. So it's not a question of we're not happily married, it's you. Why not?
We always seem to be arguing.
Rubbish.
We're arguing now.
No, we're not. We're discussing.
We're arguing.
I won't let you get me into an argument by insisting that we're arguing.
Everything that you write, of course, naturally comes from experience. And there are a lot of experiences that you'd rather not go through again. And if you can enlarge on those things and make them seem even more ridiculous than they were when they happened to you, then maybe they might stop.
Chapman plays the lead in this film, but he also makes his living as a writer. He scripted many of the Doctor series for ITV, not surprisingly, as that's what he used to be. In fact, his parents would have preferred him to remain a student at St Bartholomew's Hospital, rather than going to New Zealand with the Cambridge Footlights Review.
But fortunately, at the time, I was secretary of the Students' Union, and the Queen Mother was opening a new biochemistry block at St Bartholomew's, and so, as secretary of the Students' Union, I got to have tea with the Queen Mother. She has beautiful skin. She does. Very nice. And very pleasant lady. When I mentioned the fact that I'd been offered this part in a tour of New Zealand, she said, "Oh, you must go. Such a beautiful place and interesting." So I used that on my parents as though it was a royal command, and it worked.
Terry Jones is the director of the current film.
Can we oil Mike a bit? That's funny that you oiled Mike. So healthy.
I'm never conscious of actually doing anything positive. It's only sort of trying to get the camera rolling at the right time, I suppose.
Okay.
Everybody's relying on sort of, they're doing things, performing things, and then saying, was that all right, really? And it's a question of sort of everybody saying, well, yes, we think that was all right, or perhaps you could do this a little bit differently.
Start again.
Jones is something of an intellectual. He's just finished a book about the night and the Canterbury Tales.
It's a rather sort of intimate study of 30 lines of the Canterbury Tales. It's really basically, it's explaining some 600-year-old jokes. It's just sort of trying to find out what was making them laugh 600 years ago and why these lines were funny and why Chaucer wrote them.
Although he's directing this picture on his own, he directed Monty Python and the Holy Grail with Terry Gilliam.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
Well, what's that then?
I've had worse.
my feeling on the last one was that with two of us directing, we're always shouting. Both of us run on adrenaline, really, and we were both shouting madly. And I found it very confusing for the crew. I think the crew found it that way too. And I thought it wasn't really the best thing. I think fascism, whatever it is, dictatorship is really important in filmmaking in a way. It really needs one voice, really, to hold it together. Where's he going?
Terry Gilliam, the American who did the animations for the TV series, is designing this film.
I don't see the point in making sort of jokey backgrounds for the thing, because the actions and the comedies and the words and what people are doing. I really quite like the idea of trying to make some sort of real world, or apparently real world. It may not be the real world as you or other people know it, but the Romans sort of came in and started knocking through rooms and then putting their columns in and trying to impose their architecture on it. And they failed rather miserably. So it's a very odd set.
Gilliam directed another Python, Michael Palin, in his independent film Jabberwocky.
Terry Gilliam lives very near to me and comes and offers me parts in films occasionally, because I live nearby. If you live near Terry Gilliam, you'll be all right. He'll come by in his big car and offer you a part in a film.
Like Eric Idle, Michael Palin was offered a BBC Two series of his own. He wrote it with Terry Jones. They've been writing together since they left Oxford.
She will be 80. Unfortunately, you won't see it till the BBC documentary comes out.
Yes.
So I think being given the offer to do a show, and I didn't want to do any sort of Michael Palin show, Michael Palin introduces sort of thing. And Terry and I were sort of sitting around thinking what to write. And I think actually I'd given Terry a book for Christmas called Ripping Tales or something like that. And we couldn't actually think of what area to go into for a half hour. I think Terry's brother suggested, well, you know, something like that, Ripping Tales, Boy's Own Paper. So I think we started off writing then the school story, and it seemed to work. And that was we only just did the one-off at the time.
It was the same with me dad. He'd pretend to be French when he came in, hoping I wouldn't talk to him.
Oh, quelle journée au bastelateur. Je suis très fatigué demain, Vera.
Oh, yes, dear. Eh bien, le repas est prêt.
What?
Your supper's ready.
And our Irene, my sister, she was just downright rude. Irene, guess who's got a new shovel then?
Oh, shut up, you boring little tit.
Irene, taisez-vous.
That's enough, dear.
Well, he's such a short-ass little creep. He's driving me out of my tree.
Oh, yes, the world's most boring man, yes. Eric Althwaite. Based on myself, I think. I love rainfall and all that in the north. I wanted to do a character who spoke in a northern voice all the time. And they do, don't they? There's a character like that who's always around, talking like that all the time. I like the fact that in the end he came out as you know, sort of idolised by the entire town, which was a nice little twist on it. It was just nice to do a few Yorkshire accents and go up there and film in my home county and all that. Actually, we didn't. We filmed in Durham, because Yorkshire wasn't grotty enough. Oh, no, sorry, Durham, oh, God.
The sixth member of the Monty Python team is John Cleese. He also had his own series on BBC, 40 Towers, which he wrote with Connie Booth.
Connie and I have always had a thing about suppressed rage, people who can't express their rage properly, which neither of us can. We always find it very funny to see people getting really steamed up, not being able to blast. Although Basil usually does blast, but that's really once at the end of the show when he's been provoked beyond any reasonable expectation of controlling his feelings any longer. That was a part of it. And the other part was, I suppose, that there was certainly a certain amount of me in him, and certainly a certain amount of my father. And I suppose with the suppressed anger, a certain amount of Connie too, as I've said. So it was a private thing. I never expected it to catch on anything like the way it did.
What? Do Jimmy Cagney instead.
What?
Jimmy Cagney.
Jimmy Cagney?
No, you dirty rat.
I can't do Jimmy Cagney.
Please try. I'm gonna get you.
Shut up. Okay, watch. Who's this then? Stuff you, but I'll do that for any more.
And all the scripts that I'm sent now consist of people who run into rooms and are rude to everyone and then usually hit somebody and then probably smash a few things, you know. Sort of like late Marty sketches, you know. And this is apparently all I can do now. But Basil was a sort of private thing. It came out of this hotel that we'd stayed at in Torquay, and this wonderful gentleman, who's now, I'm glad to say, emigrated to Canada. There have been no libel proceedings. It was based on him and his wonderful bad temper, which just made me laugh.
I think everybody's hoping the other's going to fail dismally.
There are strengths which you get from the group of 6, which you can never get from doing something on your own or just in a partnership.
I think it's actually it's a salvation in a way, because one can become such an unbearable egomaniac if left to one's own devices.
It's such a tight, anal little group. It won't let anything alone, you know. It's just won't wing or busk anything. It's just get it right, get it right. And there's always one mind that's worrying and niggling at it and won't let it go. That's the healthy thing of it.
They're not bad company. A bit noisy in the early mornings. Oh. That secret art.
There's no hidden fighting, I don't think, anymore.
There's a much nicer, I suppose you could say almost healthier feeling in the group, because towards the end of the time when we've been working together, which I suppose was about 4 to 5 years, working 10 months in the year together probably, I think that certainly I, and to a lesser extent Michael and Eric, were very, very keen to run off and chase our own tails. That's Michael now hiding behind the branch. If he moves it, he's going to plant it. He's got a book on gardening. This is another of his exhibits. Good morning, Michael.
I was just practicing for the burning fiery bush, you see.
Oh, right.
Carry on.
He's written a fiery bush.
Good luck with the makeup sketch.
I mean, what Michael has... it's a strong grip.
Oh, John, hurry up and get made up. That's 4 makeups every morning. That's impossible, you know.
They don't always interview me. I have to sit here being made up until they come along. You know, they only ever interview people when they're being made up.
Well, I'll see you in the caravan. I can't wait any longer, John.
All right, Hen.
You promised me 9:30 in the caravan. I've got the baby oil.
Right. I'll be in there. Inflate it, won't you?
Oh, stop thinking about sex. You're always on about it. Morning, noon and night. Will the girls like this? Will the girls like that? Is it too big? Is it too small? I was just wondering if you thought my nose... Get your filthy little mind off it. You're 40 years old now. You should have grown out of all that. I'm just getting interested in it, Mum. It's time you got interested in a job, my lad.
As well as their fame and their money, the group has a more lasting achievement. They contributed a new word to the English language. Pythonesque.
A camel is a bus stuffed by very bad taxidermists. A bus stuffed by blind taxidermists. How about that? Like that?
A double-decker. That's a dromedary.
Very good. A camel is a lolly seen through an enormous magnifying glass.
I was going to say a camel is an ice cream that I wouldn't eat.
Wasn't it great this morning when that camel got a big stiffy and ran around the field?
Oh, the big, really long one.
It was the longest thing I've ever bloody seen, that.
That wasn't a camel, that was a donkey. Designed by a camel.
Donkey is a camel without any humps.
See what ran around behind my caravan.
The donkey is a camel no one designed.
Before they hatched the apocryphal python, all 6 of them had made reputations in other television comedy programmes.
Mike, Terry and I and Terry Gilliam were all working on a show for Thames, and they didn't have a studio for 2 years, so we'd already got a show to go to there. And then John and Graham were going to do a show, and I think basically John wanted to get more people. I would say that it was John's desire to be in more of a larger group rather than do a John Cleese, Graham Chapman show. That's what made him naturally evolve towards, I think Michael appealed to him, and we were kind of with Michael.
Mike was a bit dubious to start with, actually, because they nearly had a series themselves lined up. I think it was at Thames. So it was a little sort of, well, not quite sure, and we left it open for a week or two, and then we thought, well, why not? And we went along to Barry Took, I think.
Barry Took, who actually sort of acted as the sort of middleman between us and the BBC. And I remember all cramming into a little office with Michael Mills. And he just came in and said, and Ian McNaughton and John Howard Davis and Barry. He said, what do you want? And we said, well, we want to Well, we'll just sort of do a show or something. OK, fine. 13 shows. We'll see how we go from there. Left the room.
The first 2 episodes, I went along to the first rehearsal and I thought, what the hell is all this about? I didn't know at all. I sat there with my mouth open, totally agog the first few rehearsals. I just didn't know what it was all about. And then gradually I thought, well, whatever it is, it's silly and it's fun. And
I think we had no idea what it was going to be like, and I think even during the first recording, we had no idea what it was going to be like. No idea at all. It was only like, we were about 4 ahead before it started to go out. And I know we had gangs of BBC audiences brought in coach loads, you know, these sort of elderly women who sat and tried to look for Derek Nimmo, you know.
Fortunately, as it went out so late at night, very few people had seen it. And it gradually began to get a cult status, which means, you know, it was seen by insomniacs and intellectuals and burglars.
I think early on, BBC had this was 10 years ago, Hugh Green was still in charge. I think BBC was a very different organisation then. There was much more independence, and I think to the producer, I mean, each producer was much more, he wasn't looking over his shoulder all the time to see what the person above thought. And I think then people were allowed to just get on and make the programmes, and then they were criticised afterwards, maybe. There was a sort of a body of opinion. I mean, you had Tom Sloan, who was then head of Light Entertainment, after about the 4th show, said to Ian McNaughton, the producer, well, this is terrible, this show isn't funny at all. You've got to do something about it.
I think the people who liked Python right at the start, the sort of first wave audience, knew exactly what we were on about. And then I think there was another wave that joined in later that really thought it was all about dressing up, doing silly things, you know.
One man more than any other who cleared the ground for this sort of humour, surrealist to some, just silly to others, was Spike Milligan.
Thank you, and that's the end of the news.
The Goon Show, broadcast in the early 50s, had been just as much a cult as Python was later to become.
It started off, didn't it? It was the first breakout after the war.
Yeah.
There was a great anti-feeling of everything, you know.
That's right.
And the most important thing was to get as much past the BBC censors as we could. And we used to stick... And like the soldiers laugh. You could see the sailors laugh at certain jokes and the soldiers laugh at jokes. Yeah. Then came the civilians. That's when it got tough.
We have to embarrass Spike by pointing out how old he is. Because we were all Python fans, we were 15 or 16.
Or Goon fans, you mean?
I'm sorry, Goon fans. Well, things are interchangeable, yeah. You did 1984, Spike.
Yes, we did.
And you got a good review in Punch. And I ran into my father bearing the review, you know, and saying, you see, it is good. Because, of course, he couldn't stand it.
Really?
Said it was a lot of rubbish. All the things that get said about us.
And my father liked it.
Did he?
My mother didn't. She hated it. And my mother with Python, she only likes the bits that I'm in.
And for me, the turning point came very early on when I saw the first of Spike Milligan's. I think it was Q4 then. And suddenly I had a sort of flash went through my mind, really. I suddenly remembered one of Terry Gilliam's cartoons he'd done, which was called Elephants. And he did it for Do Not Adjust Your Set. And he said he was a bit worried about it because it was just chain of consciousness. And he didn't know how it was going to work. And in fact, it was fantastic. It just went, this one thing went to another, went to another.
I was sitting there doing the title sequences, and they had this tune, the Liberty Bell, and I just thought you had to end it with something swift and violent and final. And what better than this godlike foot descending? The wonderful thing is, the foot is actually the foot from a painting by Bronzino. It's a foot of Cupid. And now it's become this incredibly destructive thing that smashes down. I think people liked it, probably for the same reason I do. It's like this terrible fantasy of when problems are getting so impossible, there's no way to deal with it. It would be so lovely if something like that was around, that just went squash and everything finalized, finished, easy.
People could write fragments of a sketch, 3 or 4 lines which seemed to work. And they could be used, they could be thrown in somewhere, instead of saying, well, I'm afraid you can't develop that, you know, because you've not got the basic ingredients as laid down in the law of comedy, you know, beginning, middle, and a tag.
Or get the new poo-poo machine. Embarrassing guests, completely authentic sound. Or why not try a new naughty nighty? Put it on and it melts. Just watch their faces, guaranteed to break the ice at naughty parties. Go on, go on. Look. Do the punchline. What punchline? The punchline for this bit.
I don't know it. Didn't say anything about a punchline.
Oh! Well, in that case, I'll be saying goodbye then, sir. Goodbye then, sir.
And the thing that depressed me slightly is a few years later I went back to do another comedy show at the BBC, a sort of guest appearance, and we got to the end of the sketch and the camera was going in and the band was going da-da-da-da, you know, as if Python had not pointed out that there are quicker and sharper ways of getting on with it, you know?
Yes, you know, it's a man's life in England's mountains green.
Right, I heard that. I'm going to stop this sketch now, and if there's any more of this, I'm going to stop the whole programme. I thought it was supposed to be about teeth anyway. Why can't you do something about teeth? Go on.
My rustic monologue. I'm not sleeping with that producer again.
Suddenly you began to look at all these other the careers that people are trying to force you into and see the absurdities very much more clearly. I think that's sort of the greatest source of a lot of Python humour, is that we're all come from middle-class backgrounds in which the professions loom very large. And as everybody who writes, you write material which is largely autobiographical from your own experience. And so I think in Python's case, we were able to write about these people because we met a lot of them, or our fathers knew them, or our fathers met them, or our fathers had great respect for them, or whatever.
Frightfully unsuccessful to say, right, today we will write a sketch which clearly exposes the folly of human existence, or something like that, because then you finish up with a very boring bit of material. But if you sit down and write something in a chemist's shop, and after about 2 minutes, something... I'm afraid I am. Could you keep it down a little?
Fine, okay. I don't like to get into other people's interviews. It won't cut well, you know.
Terry Gilliam, the art man. So he's doing the art direction on the movie. Mainly because he's not very good at words. Being American, he has a very small vocabulary, which is largely consists of the two phrases. One is, yeah, I really like that. And the other is, yeah, it really pisses me off. And life is divided for Terry into these two clear and distinct categories. Things that he really likes and things that pisses him off. 3 layers of matchboxes to clear. And Simon's over. And Vivian's over beautifully. Oh, the jump of a lifetime, if only his father could understand.
Yes, there was a little place called the Loose Box in Kensington, where there were lots of people that had practically no chin and would wahoo late into the night and slam car doors, and it was all, "Hello, Jane, how's Seymour?" and all that sort of thing, you know. Ugh. Terrible people. And so we had a competition devised for them, the Upper Class Twit of the Year. I don't know whether it had any effect on them, but apparently it went down very well at the Palace.
Yeah, they are. They're coming up to the depths. Janae's first, Vivian second, Simon third, and now they've got to take the bras off from the front. This is really difficult. This is really the most difficult part of the entire competition. My God, they're having a bit of trouble in there, I think. They're really trying.
I mean, the English are funny because they're crazy. They're mad as hatters. If you go around the world, you discover the English are quite mad and just are very funny, and they don't really realise it.
As philosophers, we're pretty nth rate. I mean, we're not not very high-powered as philosophers or social critics. So our only claim to people's attention is that we can sometimes make them laugh. But within that context, I hope, you know, we have attitudes, I suppose.
I have moments of sheer sort of unconstructive silliness, like the fish-slapping dance I liked a lot, which was John and I on the side of the canal at Teddington. And we were both in sort of pith helmets and very long sort of khaki shorts. I did this little dance with two very small fish, which was sort of loom-de-doom-de-doom, bom, and slapped John's face very lightly, loom-de-doom-de-doom, bom, loom-de-doom-de-doom, bom, 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 dee. Which John produced this huge fish, about sort of 6 feet long from behind him, just hit me on the side of the head, and I fell 15 feet into the canal. End of sketch. Very silly, you know, to get a whole unit together to do that. But that was, you know, there was no reason for that at all. I'm very glad to have done it. It's a little memorable.
The Bristol Education Authority will write to me one day and say, you realise we paid you £600 between the years 1960 and 63, and we've decided we want it back.
Terence Baylor.
Yes!
Oh, super. Eric Idle.
Yes.
Oh. Terry Gwilym.
Oh, he's here too.
Gillingham. Sorry. Graham Chapman.
Yes.
And
and Charles McEwen.
Oh,
Present.
they're all here.
Got them all in. Right. Well, thank you.
Now, we're all gathered here. This is the pre-take chat,
Excuse me,
banter that
boys.
goes on amongst the actors before the take. Roy just walking through there. There's a lot of nerves at this point. Some of the chaps are actually damp in the knickers, but the others here are just gathered to talk about their own performances.
Their new film is set in Judea in the 1st century, but the satire is aimed more at the factions and sub-factions in the Middle East today.
No, I have to have a moment's quiet now just to think about this performance.
You know, we seem to be involved in making history. I mean, what we tend to do is put a sort of modern consciousness on it. You get sort of suburban attitudes in AD 33. It's about how they're complaining and grumpy and unpleasant. And cut. It's fine. Enough. Cut.
Lighting the flames. Flames lit. Away we go.
In the basement of Pilate's Palace, the campaign for Free Galilee and the People's Front of Judea unfortunately find themselves on the same mission.
You've got your demands worked out, haven't you?
Of course we have.
What are they?
Well, I'm not telling you that.
That's the other one.
Anyway, we thought of it before you.
Did not.
We did.
You didn't.
Planning this for months, you bastards.
Oh, you bloody didn't. Tough titty for you. Oh!
Well, the thing that we've all observed about the behaviour of revolutionary groups is that if they're on the left, they tend to hate each other more than they actually hate people who were originally intended to be the enemy. So I've got a wonderful tract, a Stalinist tract, attacking the Trotskyites, which is really absolutely wonderful. The virulence, they couldn't have topped it if they were going after the National Front.
Any questions?
What exactly are the demands?
We're giving Pilate 2 days to dismantle the entire apparatus of the Roman imperialist state, and if he doesn't agree immediately, we execute it.
Cut their head off. Cut all our bits off. Send them back every hour on the hour to show that we're not to be trifled with.
Also, we're demanding a 10-foot mahogany statue of the Emperor Julius Caesar with his dock hanging out.
What? I'll never agree to that, Reg.
It's just a bargaining counter. Also, we're pointing out to them that they bear full responsibility when we chop her up, and that we shall not submit to blackmail.
The music that so many of them make, you know, it's a way of talking, which in fact seems to be completely unrelated to reality. People talk that way because they've seen other people talk that way. That is the way to address a crowd, or that is the way to address a meeting. So that's what I learned to do, and then the next generation learn it from me. It's like Shakespearean acting, you know.
Well, why don't you go and tell him that you want to be a leper again?
There's no direct parody of Jesus in the film, but there is a former leper who's annoyed because the begging business has dropped off since he's been cured.
Keep going, start again. Well, why don't you go and tell him that you want to be a leper again?
Yeah, I could do that, so yeah. What I was thinking of doing, though, was going to ask him if he'd make me a bit lame in one leg during the middle of the week. You know, something beggable, but not leprosy, which is a pain in the arse. Excuse my French, to be blunt, sir, but...
Brian! Can you clean your room out?
I don't know about the miracles. I mean, a lot of the healing, the faith healing, I would imagine was absolutely sensible. I mean, anyone who is suffering from symptoms of something that's basically got a hysterical foundation, then that could easily happen. I would have thought that was just as much as faith healing is a fact of life. That all makes sense to me. Water into wine, I would have been very dubious about. Frankly, Brian. Over the moon if it happened, but...
Although Terry Jones and Terry Gilliam, as director and designer, are working nearly all the time, with the script completed, the other Pythons have plenty of time to relax.
I soon stopped that. He didn't have an appointment. He just came up and started rubbing. I had a slight back strain after I'd been doing some heavy drinking. So I've been okay so far. It's just everyone seems to have had a sort of bad dose of...
Yes, it's a very interesting book. I'm reading The Life Cloud, The Origin of Life in the Universe, with Fred Wall and M.C. Wickramasinghe.
With an introduction by Brian Johnston.
It's Brian Johnston's life story. In this chapter, Brian and Peter West go to the West Indies. It's a very interesting story.
Eric has largely been reading the Brian Johnston story. What's it called?
It's called... I forget what it's called. Up My Way, I think, or...
It's acclaimed generally as the funniest book that's been around for months, isn't it?
Yes, but it's very, very, very slow, like Brian. It sort of tends to go on and on a bit.
You can't read more than a couple of pages at a time.
without having a 20-minute break. I was saying that I had my hair transplant done, and I'm very proud of it. I don't know if you can see it. The hair is quite good, you see, but it's in slight... That comes later. It's in slight clumps, but as it gets longer, it really begins to look quite good, don't you think?
That's personal vanity, wherever you are.
I would like to admit that, but for tax reasons, I have to explain it was really purely for professional reasons. There was an element of vanity, like about 140%. You mean your hair is tax deductible? Well, I got half off my teeth. That's not a bad lot, is it? Oh, look at that. God. That's pure porcelain, that is.
How many are borrowed, John?
There's only one of mine in there, and I've forgotten which one it is.
Left on the national debt.
Very
Go
good.
through the other parts of your body. Against tax.
Well, the knee, the right knee, that was deductible, as you can see. It's remarkable, isn't it?
My teeth don't fit. Well, that's my personal grumble, but I'm not really talked to the boys about it. Well, they broke, you see, the teeth. I have 4 teeth here, which I carry around with me and only put in every now and then to eat. And they broke earlier on and were sent back to London in a special delivery, diplomatic bag. Came back repaired, but I think they'd put an extra tooth in there or slightly widened them. So when I put them in the other day, they just wouldn't quite fit. There was one tooth that didn't quite fit, so I tried working with them in yesterday.
Right, Matthew.
It sounded a bit like that, I suppose. So I thought this may affect the performance, give it a certain amount of character that it lacks. But this morning I said to hell with it, and I left them in the little... Sorry, it doesn't...
Sorry, we're doing an interview. Sorry, we're doing an interview for the BBC.
Tell them about my teeth, I'm nearly finished. So I left them in the little glass in the hotel today, which will probably shock the maid when she comes round.
Are they tax deductible?
Well, they're totally deductible. Don't pay any tax on this glass. Open space, mate. That's building land in there. That's good development land, that is.
You get it licensed. I'm missing out on this orthodontal tax evasion.
It's very nice. I spend a lot of time in dentists. I should think I go. I spend about 2 or 3 days each week in a dentist of one kind or another. Never thought of it before.
It's quite rare for the pythons to spend time together nowadays. And although they seem to enjoy each other's company, constant togetherness is not something they all particularly relish.
It's an efficient working unit. It's not really a sort of good party unit. It has a very bad time socially. I mean, there's nothing worse than dinner with everybody around the table.
Why is that?
Well, it's a bit like a boarding school, you know? It's kind of... You know, it's too efficient as a work unit.
If you can distance yourself from them at all...
Shut up, John. Never been the same since Faulty Towers.
Just as much as their view of the world, the pythons' view of each other is the bedrock of their humour. They're intrigued by each other, even amused by each other.
Eric? He's always got something going for him, some crusade, which makes him feel a little more laid back than anyone else. Laid back is the way he currently feels. Because I don't know what it means, but he's definitely laid back. He told me he was.
Eric idly, yes, Eric does a lot of jokes. You have to slow Eric down on the jokes just a little bit. It's all right the first 3 hours, you know, but...
Terry Jones is a fanatic about filming in particular, and I've noticed that he's at home a fanatic about real things like real ale and unprocessed food, which means that here, of course, he's constantly eating fish which comes out of one of the most unnatural oceans in the world, which is full of men's effluent. And while he's being folklorique, he's getting a gastrointestinal flora, which is folklorique to such an extent that I have to fill him up with little pink pills so that he can direct.
And Terry Jones, who of course is Welsh, so it's very difficult to know what else to say, but don't get into an argument with Terry unless you sort of have a free week, basically.
Terry Gilliam American, yes. He can make strange sounds, but he hasn't quite learned to talk yet. I remember him once. He has a relatively small vocabulary, I suppose. He says bunch a lot, when he means a lot. I remember him when we were flying over were doing a tour of Canada and were flying over the Great Lakes, and Terry looked out of the window and said, "Hey, you guys, a whole bunch of water." Which really sums Terry up, I think.
I mean, he's just as bright and as verbal as anyone. It's just that at moments it seems to leave him. I think at moments of creative excitement, I think that's when it tends to go. His legs are wonderful. Have you seen his legs?
Michael Payne was appallingly normal. He would agree with me there, I think. Yes, there he is, with wife and children, all very happy together, in not too large a house, not too small a house, in a not too nice part of London, that's not too awful either, with moderately terrible neighbours that are quite pleasant, really, when you get to know them.
Michael is, I think, probably the funniest, really, in conversation. He's delightfully silly, and he's liable to run into absolutely inspired spells of complete, well, it's creative genius, actually. I mean, he just goes in certain characters, and he just creates material. Really, the only person I know who can do that, apart from Peter Cook. He's a terribly nice man, Mike. I always told him he was much too nice for his own good.
Oh, Cleasy. Yes, a strange fellow, Cleasy. I've never actually seen the top of him, always in cloud.
I like John a lot. I think he's incredibly strange.
He's a very tender person. He's very shy and sort of really soft inside. He puts on this huge exterior and bluff. He gets very cross, you know, he gets very worked up, and the great thing about his comedy is he works it absolutely all out. It's all up front, straight out and used. It's very healthy. But he's really a cutie.
I don't know how to describe John. I think he would probably take sex too seriously, for instance. There'd have to be some other point other than pleasure in it, perhaps. It has to be a little cerebral. If he read, perhaps, some authority has said that it is extremely good, then it will be.
But Graham Chapman is probably more candid about himself than he is teasing about the others. For several years, he was almost an alcoholic.
Perhaps it's having come from a grammar school gov and going up with all those people in Cambridge and all that. I think I felt inferior, and that's the reason. I suppose drink gave me courage to speak up and use my voice.
Graham was wonderful in his missing years, and in fact one misses him somewhat on some occasions. Because it's stuffy and formal. One really needs Graham crawling around the room, trying to kiss all the men and insult all the women. I mean, it did have a certain dangerous, you are here now feel to it.
I mean, you know the story, and the answer really is that he's been an absolute transformation. Because there was a time when there was this strange, preoccupied creature wandering around, forever looking at his watch and missing the point of what was being said. And now he's transformed into a sort of benevolent, intelligent man who is completely with it and who knows what's going on.
For a time, he was outspoken about his homosexuality.
I suppose I'm outspoken about it probably over much, in fact, because I was crusading a little bit. I think the atmosphere's a lot healthier now. I've even had doubts myself, you know, on occasions, that I might perhaps be going the other way.
We go along different paths, really. It's like sort of knowing somebody who's on a railway line next to you, and you're not in the same carriage or in the same train, but you're going along together, waving happily at each other, and sort of, I think, respecting each other's differences, perhaps.
Oh, look! He has given us a sign! He has given us a shoe! A shoe is the sign! Let us follow his example! What do you mean? Let us, like him, carry one shoe, and let the other be upon our foot, for this is his sign, that all who follow him shall do likewise! No! The shoe is a sign that we must gather hold of the good!
No, it's a sign that, like him, it was none of the things of the body, but of the face and head.
Give me your shoe!
No, get up!
Stand up! No, it's not!
Get
away! Keep on on!
Clear off!
Swallow the
refuse. They will leave us to him.
All you call yourself goodies!
I think it's worth doing Python as long as we feel there are things to say, I suppose, and feel there are things wrong as we look around the world. The world changes as well. It's never going to get the way we see it. I'm sure there is always something to flail out against as we sink into the oblivion.
Yeah, but if I see something which there's bad language used and I enjoy it, I actually usually ring up the BBC. I don't give my name because they obviously think I've got an axe to grind. But just as a viewer, if something's made me laugh, I think it's very nice that bloke was able to say, "You silly sod," instead of "You silly chump."
Do you actually say that to them?
That's
so
the reason I'm very glad I enjoyed the programme and I thought it was very real and I thought the bad language was absolutely justified. Because I don't, I mean, we all...
Please. This is a much cheaper film.
But we have a little film over there to do. Don't mind.
Now, which one is this?
This is when you're a crowd again.
I'm getting confused between the cameras.
Who's
that? What is that one shooting you? That is shooting Granada. That's Granada shooting a BBC film about us.
Come along.
Well, who's shooting Granada?
Well, that's
Tunis. Oh, that's Tunis.
Right, now all these people are going to come rushing through here, so you'll have to move.
After a day's filming like this, we'll probably go back and have a sort of drug-based orgy of some kind or another. Women will be brought in, politicians, anybody, you know, as good as an orgy. And a lot of stuff will be smoked, drunk, talked, you know. There'll be 3 kinds of orangeade. There'll be Ribena, there'll be cherryade for the children. Oh, there are children. And, of course, obviously straw for the animals.